Hello and welcome to another My Porch Prints tutorials. This is Kyra and today I'm going to be showing you a tutorial on how to bind a journal, specifically 9 different methods that you can use. So this is perfect for anyone who is new to journal binding, or if you've been doing this a long time and are just looking for some new ideas potentially. This is by no means an exhaustive list of binding methods. These are just the ones that I like to use the most. So I'm going to be giving you a tutorial on them, as well as talking a little bit about the pros and cons of each of them and what I like or dislike. But feel free to use the timestamps to skip around if you want to, if there's something specific you want to find. I am going to start off with kind of a really simple basic journal tutorial where I make a full journal using our hidden spine binding method, but for the remaining binding methods I'm going to just use an example spine for each of those since I didn't have time to make 9 different journals. However, I will have links in the description box where I use these methods to make full journals like the ones you see on screen, so you can go down there and find what you're looking for if you want a more in-depth tutorial on how these look in an actual journal. Alright, to begin, I'm going to be starting with our hidden spine template. This is a binding method that utilizes a pamphlet stitch, but with the actual template, it means that you can't see the stitch on the outside of the journal, which allows you a lot more freedom with decorating the spine. So this template is available for free in our Facebook group. It is a freebie that you can just have and download, or you can pick it up in our Etsy shop if you want to do that instead. Either way is fine. So I did print this out on cardstock, and it comes in multiple sizes for multiple different spines. I went ahead and picked the 1-inch spine today just to keep things kind of simple. I didn't want to work with too many signatures, just to kind of help you guys see what you're doing. So I went ahead, again, printed this on just plain cardstock. You can run this through a printer and print a decorative paper on top of it if you want to make it match your journal. I'm going to leave mine white today just so you can see what I'm doing. And we're going to be cutting out these 2 pieces here. We've got the actual spine template and then this little guide here. And this is going to help us keep our signatures even with our spine. So what you're going to do is cut these out, and we're going to fold these pieces along the folding lines here. So go ahead and just crease them. I like to fold mine back and then forward just to make sure that I keep everything straight. So let's go ahead and do that. And you can see here that we've got these little holes that are marked, and we're going to be poking these out. Now you can use a needle or an awl from a bookbinding kit, or a hole punch, however you want to do it is fine. I'm going to go ahead and stick with the awl here, and I'm just going to poke each of these little holes out that are already marked on the template, just like so. So go ahead and just poke all of those out, and then we can set these aside for a little bit while we actually work on making the journal, because as promised, I'm going to show you how to make kind of a quick full journal in case you've never done this before. Alright, so to begin, I'm just taking 2 pieces of regular printer paper and I'm just overlapping them by about 1/2 inch. It doesn't have to be perfect. And we're going to glue these together. And you can use decorative paper for your journal to save time, or you can use plain white paper and decorate on top of it. It's kind of up to you. I'm going to just keep things simple so you can see what I'm doing here today. And then I have some pieces of chipboard here, and I cut my spine piece to match my template. So I have a 1-inch template, so I want a 1-inch spine. And we have these chipboard pieces available in our Amazon affiliates shop if you want to find them there, or you can use a piece of like a cereal box and cut out your covers and spine. And how big they are is kind of up to you. These are 5.5 by 8.5 inch pieces. So and then obviously the spine is 1.5 by 8.5. And I'm going to go ahead and kind of lay them out in a book fashion, front and back cover, leaving about 1/4 inch, maybe a little less, space between the covers and the spine. And I'm going to glue them down to my papers, just like this, leaving about a 1-inch border. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. And then we're going to be folding the corners in just like this, and gluing those down to our covers. And then we're going to do the same thing with all the edges, folding them up around the edges of our chipboard and gluing them down. And all of the supplies that I use is linked again in our Amazon shop. So if you're looking for glue, chipboards, printers, hole punches, anything like that, you can find that down in the description box. All right, so now that we have the base for our journal, we're gonna set that aside and start with our signatures. So I went ahead and grabbed some of these papers from our shop. This is from our Shades of White junk journal kit. So I already had these papers kind of lying in a pile on the table. I didn't even bother to count them. I'm just going to be taking a stack of them. I don't know, there might be like 12 pages here, and I'm going to be splitting them in half to make my 2 signatures. So, you know, it really depends how many pages you want in your journal, so you can add more or less papers to your signature. It's kind of up to you. And then when you have the number of papers you want, you can take the entire stack and fold them in half, and that's going to give you your complete signature. You can fold the pages individually if you want. This is just a little bit quicker. And you can see now I've got 2 complete signatures. So what we're going to do is start our binding. So go ahead and take your first signature here, open it up to the very center page here, and we're going to add this little template piece right into the crease of our signature. All right. So just line up the creases just like this. And I like to use bulldog clips to hold it in place so it doesn't move around. And then I'm going to be punching my holes through the actual sort of crease and spine of my signature, just like this. And again, you can use an awl, a needle, a hole punch, however you want to make these holes is fine. And we're going right through the spine, just like this. So go ahead and do that for all 3 of the holes here. And it's important to make sure that your template piece is not moving around during this process. We want to keep everything aligned. And then when you're done punching the holes, you'll want to remove that template piece. Make sure that you don't leave it in, that's very important. But you don't want to also move your pages around. So I'm leaving them clipped together like this, and that helps keep all of my papers aligned. And then grabbing our hidden spine here, we're going to be connecting this to our signature, right? So go ahead, it doesn't really matter which direction it's facing, but you're going to take the first set of holes here, and that's going to be the first signature, okay? So taking our spine, we're going to be lining it up, the holes with that, and then stitching these together. Okay, so for that, I am going to be taking a bookbinding kit. Again, this is linked in our Amazon shop if you're interested. Otherwise, you just need to find a needle and some sort of thread. This has waxed thread, so that's kind of handy for bookbinding. So I'm going to just choose some that I think will work well with this journal. And I'm going to go about 3 times the length of my spine, and that should give me enough string here. Make sure to drop your string on the table. That's also a very important part of this process. And then we're going to be threading our needle with the string, and you want 1 short tail and 1 really long tail. So you'll want to leave about, I don't know, about 4 inches, maybe 5 inches of string on one end, and then the longer piece on the other side, right? And we're going to begin by going through the back of our template here, and we're going to start right in this center hole. So going from the back to the front of our template, just like this. And we're going to pull that through. And we're going to keep tugging until we've left another little tail here, again, about, 4 or 5 inches. And I'm going to use a clip to hold that down. And that keeps us from accidentally pulling the string out while we're doing our stitch. Because if you do that, you'll have to start over. All right. So picking up our needle again, we're going to find the center hole of our signature and make sure that your signature is right side up. I've sewn in signatures upside down before and had to cut my string and redo it. So check that now. And we're going, again, center hole from the back to the front of our signature, or from the outside to the inside. Okay. So tug that through just like this, and as you tug, it will tighten until the hidden spine template is snug to our signature. Now we're going to go up to the top hole from the inside out, and again finding the top hole of our first set of holes in our hidden spine template, and stitching that through just like this. Pull it tight. And that is going to create our first stitch here as part of our pamphlet stitch, is what this stitch is called. And then we're going to go all the way down to our last hole here on the very bottom, or the top, it really just depends where you started. And we're going to push it through our spine template and then through this last hole in our signature, just like this. And then we're going to go back through the center hole again, and be careful not to accidentally stab through the string. Otherwise you'll create kind of a knot here and it'll mess things up. So just be careful of that. And then we can remove our needle, and we've got these two little tails here that we want to tug until the string is tight and snug and everything is stitched together strongly. And then we're going to take these two ends and we're going to tie them in a knot. And it's really important that when you do this, that you tie them over the top of this center string here. We want it to be like inside the knot when we tie it. That's really important. Otherwise, the stitch will just pull out of your book. All right, so tie that tightly. You can do a double knot if you want to make sure everything is secure. That's what I like to do. And you can leave the strings here if you don't mind, or you can cut them off. Again, that's kind of up to you. And then we can remove our clips from our signature, and our first signature is now bound to our hidden spine template, just like that. So again, this is called a pamphlet stitch, but we're using it with a hidden spine so that you can't see it on the outside of the book. All right, just like that. You can see it's held in really securely. I do really like this binding method. It might seem a little bit intimidating for somebody who is just getting into binding the first time. A lot of people like no sewing because it makes them a little worried. Maybe they don't like needles or something like that. But this is a really handy method for binding in pages to your journal. It's one of the first binding methods I ever learned. And once you get used to it, it's actually pretty quick. So right now, this is all real time. I'm going to be repeating the steps that we just did with our second signature here in our second set of holes on our template. And again, if you have a wider spine, you might have more holes for more signatures. We kind of created our signatures, like the amounts of them, to kind of correlate with the spine. So for example, if you do a 3-inch spine, I believe it has room for 5 signatures. So the bigger the spine, the more pages you'll use, more signatures you'll need. But once you get used to this method, it is really quick, it's really easy to do, and it is pretty reliable. I don't have a lot of problems with this method, so I am going to give it a stamp of approval and recommend it to you. One of the only things I will mention with this is that because of how the signatures are spaced, you will be able to see the hidden spine between your pages. So this is why you might want to print a decorative print on top of it. Otherwise, you know, as you fill your journal, it should kind of help to hide that a little bit, but just something to keep in mind. And some other pros are that you can slip pieces of ephemera in between the stitches on the inside of the book, or you can add things like charms and things like that. So there's a little bit of extra decoration play that you can do with this stitching method. All right, now for actually adding it to the journal, we're going to add glue to the tabs on either side of our binding, just like this. And we're gonna line up the spine of the template with the spine of our book, and we're going to press those little tabs down on either side. And I'm going to clip my pages together here and let everything kind of lie flat and dry completely before I start messing around with decorating the cover. And once it's glued in, you can see here all of our pages are now stuck inside of our cover, just like this. And as you can see, there is no stitching that is shown on the outside spine of our book, so that's completely free to decorate. And you may be able to see a little bit of curving of the hidden spine inside the book. That's entirely normal, so just keep that in mind as well. And then I'm doing my decorating now, so I'm just going over my edges with a little bit of distress ink, and I'm laying some panels on top of those tabs from the hidden spine and kind of blending them in with my inside cover here to kind of hide the hidden spine entirely. And I have some of these book covers from our antique book cover kit, as well as our pretty spines kit. I just found a spine that matches my covers here. And I printed the cover twice so that'll be matching on the front and back. And then I found a matching spine that matches the size of my journal spine, so a 1-inch spine. And I'm just going over my covers with a rounding hole punch. No, what is it called? A corner rounding punch, excuse me. And then I'm going to just glue them straight down onto my cover. Again, this is a really kind of quick and dirty tutorial for how to make a fast journal, just to kind of give you an idea if maybe you're new to this and just kind of want to try something out. This is a really quick and easy way to do that. So I'm going to glue the covers down and the spine. Now you could choose a wider spine and glue it down first underneath your front and back cover, and that would hide the edges that you can see right now exposed on my spine. However, I didn't mind kind of having that little border, so I'm just going to stick with my 1-inch and leave it at that. And then I'm just taking these little journal fussy cut labels here and just gluing them down to the front and the side of my spine here, just like this. And voila, we have a really quick, simple first journal here with just a couple of signatures, a little bit of writing space, just kind of show you how the hidden spine comes together in a full journal. And of course you can go crazy and do as much decorating as you want and get really complex. I've done a lot of really beautiful complex journals with this, and I will have those linked in the description box if you want to see maybe how to do something a little more advanced, but this is a really good starting binding method for someone just getting into this. All right, our second method here is going to be very similar. We are doing a pamphlet stitch again, but this is going to be exposed and we're going to be adding buttons. So the idea here is instead of a hidden spine, we're going to have this little white strip of chipboard I have here is going to represent the outside spine of a book. So you can kind of see you'd have a front and back cover and then the exposed spine of a journal. Now for this stitch, I am going to be using the hidden spine template piece here because it will help me keep my stitch sort of centered. So even if you're not actually doing a hidden spine, you can still use the templates we have to keep your stitches centered. So they're really handy for that. So I do recommend picking them up. Again, link down in the description box if you're wanting to grab that. And I'm going to use my template here to mark 3 holes for our pamphlet stitch. And then again, this is going to be very similar if you watched the last hidden spine tutorial here. We're going to be grabbing some sort of method to poke our holes out, so you can use an awl, a needle, a hole punch. I'm going to go ahead and use a hole punch here just to make things quick and easy. But if you have an actual journal with a front and back cover, you may not be able to use a hole punch with this method because it requires a hole to be punched in the center. So you will probably need like an awl or a needle to reach that. So just keep that in mind. All right, so I've got my 3 holes punched out here. So I'm gonna grab my bookbinding kit. And I'm going to be using the same needle and wax thread from that that we used earlier. And I did go 3 times the length of my spine for my thread. However, I would actually recommend going 4 times the length because I forgot that the buttons create a little more volume, and so it's necessary to have a little more thread. All right, so I'm only using 1 page for my quote-unquote signature here, again just to not waste paper in my examples. So I just pretend that this is a whole signature of pages. You can use as many pages as you like. And I'm going to be clipping my little template piece in here and using it to punch my holes, and this is going to keep them aligned with the holes that I punched in my spine. So again, this is why I love the template. It's really, really handy. So I've punched out my 3 holes and I'm grabbing some buttons to use for today's example. You can use any buttons you have. And taking our string, we're gonna thread it through our needle, leaving about a 4-inch tail on one side and then the remainder of the thread on the other. And unlike our hidden spine, we're going to be starting actually going from the inside to the outside of our journal instead of the other way around. So we're going to start on the inside of our signature, right in that center hole, and we're going to the outside to our spine like this, pulling to the outside of the journal spine and just securing the extra tail down on the inside like this so that we don't accidentally pull it out of our journal while we're doing our stitch. Otherwise we'll have to start over. And then we're going to just pull this tight until our spine and our signatures are connected. And at this point, you're going to want to remove your needle from the thread, and we can go ahead and add some buttons. So go ahead and just thread your string right through the button like this. And then you're going to want to find a hole on the opposite side and thread it right through that. And then pull it tight. And then you can slide the button down the string until it's in the position you want it to be in. And I'm only using 4 buttons, but you can use as many buttons as will fit on your string. So get creative with different colors and patterns and sizes. Just have fun with it. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and slide it down to about there on my string. And I'm gonna take a slightly larger button here and do the same thing. Thread it onto my string and then just slide it down into place until I'm kind of happy with where it lays. Just kind of like this. And then from here we can grab our needle again and re-thread the needle. So just pull it through again until you have like a little tail here, and then we can go ahead and continue our stitch. All right, so now we can move to the top hole that we made in the back of our spine, and then in through our signature, just like this, lining up the holes and pulling the thread through. And then we're going to stitch all the way down to the bottom to our last hole here, and then going through our signature and through our spine out through the back again like this. And again, here's where we will remove our needle and thread on our buttons for our remaining stitch here. So just repeating the process, going through, and I'm going to start with my larger one this time and then go for my smaller one next, sliding them into place. And then we're going to add our remaining string back to our needle, and you can see here I'm starting to kind of run out of string, so this is why I recommended 4 times the length instead of 3. Sorry if you can hear my cat in the background, she really wants dinner. And then we're going to go through the center hole again and tugging it right through to the inside of our signature like this, and removing the needle. We now have these 2 tails that we can tug until our stitch is tight, and we're going to tie these in a knot just like this. And it's important with the pamphlet stitch to keep this center string inside of that knot, otherwise you'll accidentally pull the whole stitch out. And I'm going to do a double knot here to make sure things stay. And you can leave these strings to add buttons or charms or tie it in a bow if you want. I'm just going to cut mine off. And now you can see that our signature is attached to our spine. Of course, if you have a larger spine or more signatures, you can do as many of these as you want and just kind of repeat them with each signature you have. For today's example, I'm just sticking with the one, but you can see here that we have the exposed pamphlet stitch on the outside of the spine with all of these little buttons. So it just adds a little something to the stitch, gives it a little more character, adds a little bit of decoration to the binding of your journal. I actually don't have a full tutorial for this yet because I've actually never done this before. This was my first time kind of trying this out, and I really like it. So keep an eye on the channel. There should be a tutorial coming out soon with this because I definitely want to revisit it again. All right, the remaining tutorials for this video are going to be no-sew binding method, so there's no sewing involved. And the first one we're going to be using is a brad binding method. This is a method that I came up with kind of on accident, maybe 1.5 years ago, and it's one of my favorites, so let's go ahead and jump right in. To start, we're going to be poking our holes in our spine, and with this method you can actually choose whether or not you want to use just 2 holes or 3. So this is one that you could potentially use a hole punch if you don't have like a needle or you don't want to use an awl. This would be a good method for you. And leaving the center brad out just allows you to do things like this, like an exposed window in the center of your spine. It just might have slightly less stability, but honestly I haven't really had any problems with that. And if you want to use 3, you can kind of get decorative with the types of brads you use. So you know, it's kind of just up to you, whatever you want to try. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and just do 2 today to keep things simple, one at the top and one at the bottom, using my hidden spine template to mark those holes. So I'm gonna go ahead and just punch those out with a hole punch here. And then I will also be making the holes in the signature. And again, I'm only using one piece of paper for my signature today just to save on paper. So I'm going to open it up to my quote unquote center of my signature, and I'm going to poke just those 2 holes. We don't need this third one here because again, I only made 2. So I'm going to poke the hole just like this using a needle this time. Just like that. And then removing that hidden spine template piece, I'm going to grab a couple of brads, and you can find these in different sizes, different colors, different styles. So just find some that you like. And then I'm going to be poking them in from the back, or I guess the outside of my spine of my journal, and then going to the inside of my signature like this. And it's important to rotate your brads so that the prongs are vertical, not horizontal, otherwise you won't be able to close your journal. So go ahead and just open those up, and you're going to do the same thing with as many holes as you made, 2 or 3. And of all the methods I'm going to show you today, this might be my favorite one just because it's very sturdy, very reliable. It's very quick. You can have your journal bound in just a couple of minutes. It's usually really accessible for people who don't like sewing or don't want to work with needles or things like that. It also has the added bonus of you can actually close the prongs back up and pull the brad out, which allows you to take pages in and out of your journal with ease. So there's some versatility there. And if you want to, you can cover up those prongs on the inside with like a piece of paper or some ribbon if you don't mind not being able to take your pages out. And you can also buy prongs that have kind of a flat top to them if you're bothered by kind of the dimension on the brad itself. All right, so that is it for the brad binding method. So let's go ahead and move into, another binding method here, the tie-in binding method. This is pretty self-explanatory just from the name of it. Literally, you're just going to take your signature and you're going to wrap either string or ribbon around the very center of your signature, and then you're going to tie it around the spine of your journal and just tie it in a little bow or a little knot. This is really popular with people who are just getting into journaling for the first time. It looks pretty cute on the outside of a journal, and it is really quick and easy to use. You can see that mine's sliding around a lot because I don't have a front and back cover, so there's nothing to really keep the string in place. But that is also an issue that I have with this method, even with a cover. So let me talk about a couple of reasons why I don't like this method and my alternative for it. So first off, you have the problem of if you tie the string too tight, it can tear your signature, or if it's too loose, your signature pages will fall out over time. So that's something that bothers me a little bit. And there is also a problem with the strings sliding around on the spine themselves, and sometimes they can slide in between the spine and the cover. So you can see in this journal here, there's some cute decorations here with a little bit of leftover string or tying the strings together in the center. But unfortunately, this string here has slid over between the cover and the spine, and it is tearing the book apart. So again, this just isn't my favorite reliable method, just because it usually does mean that over time, if you're not careful, your journal will start to fall apart. Some pros of it is how easy it is to add ephemera and pages by just sliding it under the string, so that is kind of nice if you just want to add pages into a journal quickly. But my preferred method for the tie-in method is the eyelet tie-in. It eliminates some of those problems that the regular tie-in has. So for this, I am again grabbing our hidden spine template here, and I'm going to use this piece to help me mark off a couple of holes. We only need 2 this time, one at the top and one at the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and mark those here. You don't really need to use a template to mark this. I just kind of like it because it keeps things centered for this tutorial. But as long as you have one hole at the top and one at the bottom, you should be able to add in your signature. So I'm going to go ahead and punch out those holes, and it's important to use the right punch for the size of eyelets you have. You don't want it to be too big or too small, so make sure you double check on that. I believe this is a 3/16 inch punch. And I'm going to go ahead and flatten my eyelets using the eyelet press. This is on a Cricut that we have. Again, link in our Amazon shop down below if you want to pick one of these up. And then now we're going to do basically the same thing we did with the tie-in method. I'm going to be grabbing just a piece of ribbon that I have here, wrapping it around the center of my signature here, my 1-page signature. And I'm going to be threading the ends of the string through those eyelet holes that we made. So right here at the top like this, and then also at the bottom. And now, since we haven't tied it around the spine itself, you can see that the string is contained by the eyelet, so it won't be tearing your paper, it won't be tearing your spine, it won't be sliding around, but you still get a really easy tie-in method. So this is why I prefer the eyelet tie-in. I just think that it's a little bit more reliable. It makes sure that your journal is going to last a little bit longer, but it still keeps the tie-in sort of pro of being able to untie this string and pull pages in and out of your journal. So, you know, that's still really handy in case you're somebody who likes to add pages in or take pages out. The tie-in method still works the same way even with the eyelets. So this is kind of my preferred method for doing the tie-in. I just think it's a little more reliable and has less of the problems from before. Now, the full journal tutorial that I made for this tie-in method with the eyelets is slightly different than the one I showed you today. The only difference being that I punched holes through the signatures themselves and tied the string in that way. Honestly, you don't have to do that. You can just tie it around the signature. Either method would work, but just letting you know the tutorial is a little different. Alright, so this next method does not have a spine that we're going to be using because we're going to kind of be building the spine of the journal as we go. So this is going to be the fold and glue method. The fold and glue method might look familiar to some of you if you've been following our channel for a while, because this is how we usually do the no-sew journals that are available in our shop. And essentially what you need are the pages for your journal. You don't have to print on the back of them, and in fact you should not, because we're going to be gluing them together and it would cover it up anyway. So go ahead and make sure you print out your pages, as many as you want for your journal. And I do recommend printing on cardstock. I'm using paper in my example today because that's what was laying on the table within arm's reach, but it will be a little bit flimsier. So if you want some stability to your journal, I highly recommend using cardstock. All right. So for the actual fold and glue method here, what we're going to do is take our 2 pages, fold them in half, and then back to back, we're going to be gluing them together. So you'll want to make sure you fold it so that the decorative side is on the inside of your fold. And then getting your glue pretty close to your edges here, we're going to be gluing them together just like this, sandwiching our pages together just like so, and try to keep them as aligned as possible. This will make sure that your journal is nice and straight. And then go ahead and give it a good crease here. Let things kind of dry. And I like to flip through and make sure that no glue has accidentally spilled out and glued pages together that I don't want glued together. So I'm just going to kind of flip through here. And then you can just continue this process one after the other with as many pages as you have, folding them in half and then gluing the pages back to back. So just kind of continue, rinse, and repeat until you have as many pages as you like. And you can do this, you know, with just a few pages, or you can do this with a lot of pages. And just the more pages you have, the thicker your journal will be. All right, so I'm just going to use a couple of pages for today's example just to save time, but you can see here kind of how this works. You've got all of your pages glued together, and now you can just flip through your journal pages back to back like this. So it's a really easy method for binding. And then to actually turn this into, you know, a full journal, what you can do is build the base for your journal with the front, back cover, and spine, and then you can glue these blank sort of pages on either end of your signature to the front and back cover, and it will kind of be like a sort of like a, you know, an accordion-ish situation here where you can flip through your pages and they're just glued into both covers. Or you can also add them to a pre-existing journal by gluing the pages either in between signatures or like to the front cover and then to the front page of your first signature. So that would be another way to add it to a journal. So that's one method. And then the other way that you can do it is to actually create sort of like a soft cover journal, like I did in this journal here, where I took kind of like a faux spine and a faux cover front and back, just printed on cardstock, sort of like the pieces we used in our example here. And then I just wrap it around the journal. So it won't be as hard, it'll be a little bit more bendable here, but it will still have some sturdiness from the cardstock. So you can just wrap the covers kind of around your signature and create a journal that way. And I'm kind of showing you a little example here for like a really quick soft cover, just wrapping a page around and gluing it down. And that hides the white and kind of makes it look like one complete journal here. And if you have any pages that are sticking out a little bit, feel free to trim them down or go over them with some distress ink, and that will help them all kind of like fit together even if you didn't glue them perfectly straight. All right, so here's kind of what that looks like as a fold and glue method. Another method here that is no-sew would be the hinge binding method. So this is good if you have either single pages or if you have like full signatures that you want to add a little something to. So with hinge binding, you can use tape, you can use paper, you can use fabric, so long as it is wide enough to kind of stick your two pages together, and you can kind of see what I mean here. You just want to make sure that's wide enough to kind of cover the crease. And for my example today, I'm going to use paper, and you can use just a straight piece of paper, or you can tear the edges and make it look all distressed. Essentially, all you have to do is fold that piece of paper in half like this, and we're going to be gluing it down kind of between our two pages or signatures or whatever you're trying to connect here. So we're making a literal sort of paper hinge to hold our pages together. And this method works a little bit better than the fold and glue if your pages are printed front and back, so that you can still see all of your, pretty pages that you printed out without covering up too much of them by gluing them together. And something to keep in mind is if you are using tape as your hinge method, when you're done with that, you will likely, even, if you really get your pages really close together, you will still be able to feel a little bit of the tape on the outside spine here. So what I like to do is actually cover my spine with something like, again, tape or fabric or paper, and it just kind of makes it look a little bit nicer and covers up any pieces that might be sticking out and might be kind of sticky. All right, so that is kind of a really quick way to do the hinge method to make like a little signature or a journal, and you can do the same things you might have done with fold and glue, gluing it into a base journal or giving it its own cover and spine. All right, our next method here is going to be a ring-bound journal, and there are various types of rings you can buy to bind your journal, so you kind of just have to find one that works best for your project. Now, I'm not actually going to show this method because it's kind of self-explanatory. Essentially, you're just punching holes in each of your pages or your signatures and then adding them onto a ring. Personally, I don't love this method as much. I feel like it's a little clunky, and if your pages aren't printed on like cardstock, then it's pretty easy to accidentally tear them out of your journal. So it's not my preferred method. My mom does like using it because it's pretty quick and handy. It has kind of an industrial look, but again, I find it a little clunky. So personally, I'm not going to recommend this one, but if it's all you have, go for it. Maybe you can make it work and make it look beautiful. All right, my last little method here is not actually a binding method. It's a faux, this says cross stitch, it should say corset stitch. I think my brain just kind of had a little bit of a stutter there, but this is a faux corset stitch. You can do a faux cross stitch. I will also have that linked down below if you are interested, but essentially what this is it looks like you did a complex journal stitch when actually you kind of did the easier method, and it's supposed to look the same without being so complex. So essentially you will bind your journal with any of the other methods I mentioned today, and then you will make this spine to kind of glue down onto the outside of your journal, and it's more decorative than anything. So this isn't, again, an actual binding method, but I wanted to show it to you guys since I think it looks pretty cool and it's just kind of fun to know. All right, so to start, I have a 2-inch spine that I'm working with here. So I'm going to be measuring out where to put all of my punches to make sure that my stitch looks nice and even. So to start, I'm going to be grabbing a ruler, and at the bottom of my spine, I'm going to be marking off a 1/4 inch in from the left edge and in from the right edge here. So I'm going to go ahead and just mark those off, and you can use a pencil. I'm using a Sharpie to make sure you can see my marks, but you might want a pencil in case you want to erase these marks for some reason. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing to the top and bottom of my spine, just making a mark a 1/4 inch in here. All right, and these are going to become guides for us. So we're going to line up those 2 marks we made on either side and create a straight line between them. And this is going to be where we mark our actual markings for our holes. So we're going to start at a 1/2 inch and then go down to 1 inch. And then from there, we're going to do inch increments. So we're going to go to 2 inches and then the 3-inch, 4-inch, 5-inch, 6-inch, 7-inch, and 8-inch sort of markings here. And that's where we're going to put all of our dots. So go ahead and do that along the line that we made. And then we're going to do the same thing on the opposite side. So 1/2 inch, inch, 2-inch, 3-inch, 4-inch, 5-inch, 6-inch, 7-inch, and 8-inch until that they are even across from one another like this. And I'm marking to kind of show you how the holes will line up. You do not have to mark these. I just wanted you guys to see kind of how the corset stitch is going to work. So we will have 4 corset stitches in total with this measurement here. So our next step is going to be punching out all of these holes that we made for our eyelets. So I'm going to be using my Crop-A-Dile because it has the eyelet punch and press built into it. So it's really handy for that. Again, link in the description box. If you are interested, you can find it in our Amazon shop. And we're just going to go in and punch all of those holes we made along our lines and try to keep everything nice and even here. And you might be wondering, you know, what if I want to decorate my spine? How am I supposed to do that with all of these marks and these holes punched in it already? So I'm going to show you really quickly kind of how you can decorate this. Now, you could glue like a decorative paper down before making your marks and punching your holes and just erase the marks with, you know, an eraser if you use pencil. Or we can kind of cheat the system a little bit. So I'm going to take this scrap piece of paper that I had nearby, and I'm going to first trace along the edge of my spine so that I have the right size. And then I am marking in all of my holes with a pencil, and I'm going to cut that shape out and punch all of those holes out again using a hole punch. And then I'm going to glue the piece of paper down on top of my spine, on top of my markings to hide them, lining up all of the holes like this. And now we've kind of got a blank surface that we can do some decorating on. So here you can see that I actually glued down some ribbon, and you can punch through fabric with a Crop-A-Dile punch. So it's another reason why that tool is really handy. Or if you don't have something like that, you can just trim your ribbon down so that it kind of fits inside of your holes so it doesn't cover them up like this. And then you kind of just have like an interesting little border here. So I'm gonna go over my edges with some distress ink just to make them look a little more finished. And now I can pop all of my eyelets into the holes that we made here. And I'm gonna use my eyelet press to press all of these flat. So you kind of see what that looks like here. And once that's done, we can go ahead and choose our string or our ribbon that we want to use for the actual stitch. And I'm going to be grabbing about 6 times the length of my spine, and that should give me enough ribbon here to do my full stitch without running out. So we're going to begin at our 1/2 inch eyelets here, the ones that are 1/2 inch apart. So they are the closest together here. And we're going to take one end of our ribbon and we're going to stick it through one eyelet and then through the other side as well with the other end. And we're going to pull these through here, and I want to try to keep them lined up, like keep them even lengths with one another. So just like this, I'm going to grab the two ends and make sure they're even. And then with one side, we're going to clip it down using a clip so that we don't accidentally pull it out, because we want to, again, keep things even lengths. And while that's clipped down, we're going to take the one that's not clipped down, and we're going to thread it in a diagonal fashion to the other hole that is diagonal from it. So pulling it through and then flipping around to the front of our spine, we're then going to find, again, the diagonal hole and thread it through. And if it gets a little twisted, just twist it around until it lays flat. It doesn't matter if it's twisted on the back, but you want to make sure it's lying flat on the front. It just looks a little nicer. And then again, finding the diagonal hole from that, and we're going to just continue this process of kind of threading it in and out, going diagonal here, and just make our way down the entirety of our our faux spine. Sorry, my brain is starting to quit at the length of this video. It's taking quite a while. Thanks for sticking around if you're still here and checking out these methods. But we're going to go ahead and just keep chugging along here. So keep going all the way until you reach the very last hole here at the bottom, and then we're going to do something a little different. You can leave it as is and tie your ribbons in the back of your spine if you don't want to have it showing, or you can come through like across from the hole that you just threaded through and pull it out like this. And this is going to let us tie a little bow later on. So I'm going to go ahead and clip that piece down to keep it in place, just like this. And then we're going to do the exact same thing with our other end and just repeat that process, but going with our remaining holes here. So again, threading through diagonally. And you can see this is what creates that faux corset stitch here. So again, just keep going diagonal, threading it in and out until you have all 4 stitches completed. And again, there is a corset stitch or a cross stitch method. They're slightly different from one another, but where you can actually bind pages into a journal. However, I found that it was kind of complex for what it was, and this method allows you to use something as simple as like a tie-in or a binding method, and then just kind of fake it and make things a little bit easier and still have the same look on your spine. So with this last string here, again, I'm going to thread it in diagonally, and then I'm going to come across to this other hole, and I'm going to thread it through, trying not to get it caught on my first string here. And now we have these 2 ends that we can tie into a little decorative bow here and finish up our little corset stitch, our faux corset stitch spine. All right. And then how you can use this is if you have a journal here that you've bound in with some other method, like right here I used the hidden spine method. Now all I have to do is glue this faux spine directly on top of my other spine, and it kind of just looks like I bound my book with a corset stitch, even though I secretly did not. So again, this wasn't a true binding method, but I hope that you still like it and got some inspiration. And if you feel like trying a cross stitch instead of a corset stitch, like I did with this journal here, I used a brad binding method and then faked the cross stitch. I will have that linked down in the description box, along with all of the other sort of full tutorials for these methods. So again, if you want to see like more in-depth use of these stitches and how they actually look on a journal, you can find that down below. But otherwise, that is going to finish up today's tutorial. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on future videos. But otherwise, I will see you in the next tutorial. Bye!